I move government notice of motion number 1 in my name regarding a declaration of a climate emergency. Mr. Speaker, I think the first and most important point to make is that this is a declaration based on science.
That's right.
The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the preeminent scientific body in the world on this matter, has determined that in order to avoid a situation, a disastrous 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures and beyond, a rise that would see increased risk to human health and livelihood, civil unrest, mass drought, mass disease, loss of lands and homes, increased fires, increased tropical storms, mass human displacement and globally exhausted resources, then we must act with urgency, Mr. Speaker, to ensure global emissions fall to net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, this is a declaration grounded in a deep sense of responsibility that we all must feel, but particularly given that we, as New Zealanders, are members of the Pacific. The Pacific Island Forum has called climate change our greatest threat, their greatest threat, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the goal to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees is embedded in our legislation. That's not something that every nation has done, but we have, because anything more than that means consigning this Pacific. It means consigning our region to a devastating reality that if we are responsible members of the Pacific, we cannot and will not accept. Mr. Speaker, this declaration is an acknowledgement of the next generation, an acknowledgement of the burden that they will carry if we do not get this right and if we do not take action now. So with action in mind, Mr. Speaker, today, as a government, we are also announcing the carbon neutral government program that requires government organisations to be carbon neutral by 2025. This is a declaration that will need to be supported by ongoing, continual action and activity. It sits behind the work that we did in our first term of office, our plan to plant 1 billion trees, our ban on new offshore oil and gas exploration, our goal of 100% renewable electricity generation by 2030, and we are already underway investigating a scheme, Mr. Speaker, that would allow New Zealand to have essentially the battery that helps us overcome dry years to reach that 100% renewable goal. Our record investment in rail, trains, buses, walking and cycling, and now we are moving to decarbonise that public transport fleet too. Our $100 million Green Investment Fund, our world-first partnership with farmers to reduce primary sector emissions, and our intention to make action on climate change an integral part of our COVID recovery, so that we don't only build back our environment, our economy, Mr. Speaker, that we build it back in a sustainable way with a focus on carbon neutrality. Mr. Speaker, we issue declarations sparingly. The reason we have done this today is, Mr. Speaker, in those cases where we do issue declarations are often where there is threat to life, threat to property, civil defence emergencies. If we do not respond to climate change, we will continue to have those emergencies on our shore. Mr. Speaker, I do want to acknowledge, as I conclude, the Minister for Climate Change and the Green Party, endless advocates for activity in this space that we will continue to work in partnership with. And I encourage every member of this House to take the issue of climate change with the utter seriousness that it deserves. Vote in favour of this declaration today. Be on the right side of history. Be part of the solution we must collectively deliver for the next generation.